Welcome back, you're watching World Talks and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. On October 20th, Moldovans made their way to the voting polls to cast two votes, one to choose a president and the other to decide their EU trajectory. The first led to another round of voting to take place the first days of November. The other moved Moldova slightly closer to its EU accession. But the intertwined vote turned out to be more challenging for the pro-EU camp and the sitting president Maia Sandu than previously thought. To discuss the outcomes and what it means for Moldova and Europe, I'm joined by my guest Piotr Oleksy, political scientist from the Adam Mickiewicz University. A very good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
So the two votes offered sort of competing vision of the future for the country. When we look at how the elections turned out so far, both in terms of the referendum and the presidential election, do you think it was a good idea to hold both votes at the same time?
It's a very good question, and I think, in my opinion, it was a very bad idea. First of all, we have to say that this referendum was not necessary. It was not necessary from a formal or a legal reason, because accession referendums that were held in many countries in the past, they are usually organized just in the moment before that country is joining European Union. Moldova is in the beginning of the negotiations. So it was not necessary from those kind of reasons, but it was necessary for Maia Sandu and her political camp, the ruling camp, in pro-European ruling camp in Moldova. They counted that referendum on the European path will raise support for them. But unfortunately, what happened, it was opposite. That support for Maia Sandu and ruling party became lower and lower, and that has a bad impact on the support to European integration.
So I wanted to take a closer look at the results of the referendum. They were expecting 60% pro-EU target and they reached around 50%.26. Could the result of the referendum actually predict what we could expect in the second round of the presidential elections in Moldova? Is there any correlation in between the two?
I think yes. I think it is. And the second round is very risky for Maia Sandu now. 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, most of sociologists and the researchers was convinced that Maia Sandu is going to win that elections in the first round or in the second round. Now we have the situation where when the second round is very, very, very risky, and I think that we should expect 2 weeks of very sharp campaign of a strong political conflict with interference from Russia and with some kind of support or maybe interference from the European Union, let's say.
I'm very happy that you mentioned this Russian influence because we know that Russia wanted to meddle with the elections by allegedly paying for 300,000 votes, according to the words of Maia Sandu herself. Why is Russia so interested in Moldova? What would you say is the sphere of influence? Is it about the war in Ukraine and having more influence in the region? Is it about the energy sector and how Moldova was trying to remove itself from the sphere of influence? Or maybe, after all, it's the idea of reviving sort of Soviet Union on steroids.
Let's say in the very beginning that Maia Sandu mentioned 3,100, but she said about the amount of people that Russians and their agents tried to reach, yes? And one day before, Moldovan police was speaking about 100,000 and 20,000. People that were reached and engaged in that process. We are not sure about the scale of that Russian
Could it be less? Could it be more?
Could be, yes. Could be a little bit less. Could be a little bit more. Yes, and we are not sure what was the impact of that interference on the final result. I think that it was a big impact, but how big we don't know, because most of those people that were engaged by Russians and the Ilan Shor, Moldovan oligarch who is who is a Russian agent, let's say. Those were people who they would vote for pro-Russian parties, candidates, or they would not vote at all. So, coming to your question, Moldova is important for Russia for many reasons, and those reasons that you mentioned are valid, of course. We have to enhance that Moldova is a western neighbor of Ukraine, and in Moldova, in the unrecognized separatist Republic of Transnistria, there are Russian soldiers. So Moldova, who is not so pro-Ukrainian, but more pro-Russian, let's say, would be a big problem for Kiev and would have a significant meaning for the strategic situation in the region. And of course, Moldova is important also because of the political reasons, because of the public relations, let's say, yes. Mm-hmm. Changing Moldovan foreign policy course. Thanks for that, Russian Kremlin could say to its own to its own people and abroad, which could show that we have some success, we have some serious success in our foreign policy, that West and European Union is weaker and weaker in Eastern Europe, and we are getting stronger.
Which leads me to my next question. If Sandu was not to be re-elected after the second round of the elections taking place beginning of November, what would it mean for Europe?
So in this moment we have to focus a little bit on the Alexander Stoyanoglu, the second candidate that she will fight with in the second round. Alexander Stoyanoglu is not a typical pro-Russian politician. We have to mention that he was not connected with the typical political pro-Russian forces in Moldova. He was a general prosecutor before, and even in his own rhetoric, he is not openly pro-Russian and anti-Western. He is more like a neutralist. Yes, he is appealing to the idea of the neutral Moldova balancing between two geopolitical blocks. And secondly, the president in Moldova don't have a lot of power. It is more symbolic power and more.
But it's a symbol nonetheless, as we know, symbols have an immense power when it comes to the world of politics.
Of course, and what is most important, that in the less than a year, in the late summer of 2025, we will have parliamentary elections for Moldova, those elections will be crucial. And what is going now, we observe that there is a new political dynamics which can be a threat for the pro-European path of Moldova. And the most important question will be the parliamentary elections next year.
Earlier on, you mentioned the Transnistria, and this is, I know, one of your fields of your study, of your interest. You wrote a book, Transnistria, The Terror of Identity. It's a region of many influences, individual, social, and national identities. What part do you think this region could potentially play? What part did it play so far, and what part could it play when it comes to the second round of the elections, the presidential elections in Moldova?
So this is very, very interesting, and this is one of the biggest surprise of this election, because Transnistria is usually perceived as the very pro-Russian region, far pro-Russian. But what was surprising, that 37% of the voters from Transnistria voted in favor of European integration, more than 30%, which is so we have a lot of regions in Moldova, in the south or in the east, where a lot of regions where the result was much more anti-European than in Transnistria.
Why do you think that is?
I think that.
Why do you think that? Why do you think that is? Why do you think this vote turned?
It is this is the result of the shift of Transnistrian interests. For many years, Transnistria is Transnistrian economy is living mostly thanks for relations with European Union and with the Western markets. This is the main Western markets, the European Union markets, Moldovan market, and the Ukrainian market are the most important goals of their exports, of their exports. And more people in Transnistria understand that it is hard to imagine a good future without European Union.
And as my final question, I wanted to take a look at the string of elections which is about to take place in the region. We have Georgian parliamentary elections, the 26th of October. We have Bulgarian parliamentary elections, the 27th, if I'm correct. Is it possible that Moldovan elections are not going to be the last ones where Russia is trying to meddle with the final result?
Of course, and both examples you mentioned are very possible. I think that we will observe different kind of Russian interference in Georgia and in Bulgaria in the sphere of disinformation and narrative resilience, let's say. So Russia will be very active there, and I think that I am afraid that results from Moldova are kind of bad signal for different societies. This is a signal that even in Moldova, Western is becoming weaker and the pro-Russian emotions are rising. So yes, we have a very tricky electoral autumn this year.
Do you think there's any way in which the European Western democracies could actually aid places like Moldova in order to make sure that the voting process actually goes according to the democratic standards?
Unfortunately, in this situation, Moldova is not a part of European Union, and European Union can support them, their development financially, etc. But European Union has a civilian mission to help them fighting with Russian hybrid aggression. But it is only we can only support them in understanding what is happening, what is doing. Their security is and their resilience is in their hand. So we can support them to understand what can we do, what to do, but the action is in their hand.
Thank you so much, Piotr Oleksy, political scientist from the Adam Mickiewicz University. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now here on World Talks. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please stay for more news and features.